All right, what is going on, guys and girls? This video is designed to debunk some of the common advertising myths that are out there. So, this is going to be based on what I've learned so far in the marketing world. And the first one here is probably one of the most annoying ones to hear because you hear stuff like this all the time when you're in the marketing world, whether it be in group chats or on the internet, whatever it is. And you hear people just flexing about how their ad has such a high ROAS, but they don't show you the whole ad account. They just show you that one ad. They don't tell you the full story. They say, oh, this ad has a 4x ROAS. But they don't show you that it's really just a bottom of funnel ad that isn't what actually scaled the ad account. Because that doesn't sound as good to say. It doesn't sound as good to say, hey, we found a winning video ad, right? That's top of funnel and it has a bad CPA, but our ad performance got better because of this video. That doesn't sound as good. But the problem is a lot of times that is the truth. A lot of times the ads with the highest ROAS are not the ads that actually allow you to scale or allow you to see better success with your ads. And many times the actions that you're taking that allow you to see success, they may not even be things inside the ad account. In other words, you get a new winning landing page through CRO, right? And let's say you see a 35% lift in revenue per visitor and your conversion rate increases by 40%. That may allow you to scale your ad account. That didn't have anything to do with what happened inside the ad account, but these marketing guys like to make it seem like, oh, all you got to do is just you run these ads here, and this ad right here, it brought me in a 4x ROAS or a 5x, a 7x ROAS, whatever it is, and they make it sound like it's so simple and like that's the thing that works. And a lot of times these people are just not being very honest with you, right? Oftentimes the ads that scale ad accounts are not the ads with the highest ROAS or the lowest cost per purchase in the account. In fact, it may very well be the opposite in many cases. Not all the time. You may have an ad that has a good cost per purchase and scales an ad account, but it's not always the case, right? Especially if they're showing you like static ads, for example. A lot of times static ads are going to be mid to bottom of funnel, which means they're going to typically have a better cost per result if you have a good static ad versus a top of funnel ad. Typically the top of funnel ad, because it appeals to the broadest audience of people, is probably going to have the lowest or worst cost per result or the worst ROAS, but it fills the funnel. It gets them into the door. So you may have a brand story video that has a bad cost per purchase. Let's just say, for example, you have some founder story video that you post and it's got a bad cost per purchase, but it spends a lot of money. And when it spends a lot of money, all the other ads get better. Does that make that a bad ad because that ad isn't the thing that's actually driving the sales and closing the deal? No, it's still a good ad, but it's not the ad that is closing the sale at the end of the day. It's not the ad that is finishing up the work, right? It's getting the people into the door. It's building that trust and nurturing that person so that later on they buy. You see what I'm saying? So that's myth number one, and that one's a really annoying one. Number two is, you hear this a lot from different marketing people. A lot of times the ones who aren't very ethical and they try to deceive people with sales tactics and stuff, they try to preach about how their creative testing strategy is the best and theirs is the best for this reason and this reason. Look, anybody in the marketing space, they know if they're any good at what they do, they know that the creative testing strategy that they use, assuming you apply the fundamentals of marketing, right? You're not doing something like, oh, for example, we're going to run ads to landing pages for landing page views, and that's going to be part of my creative testing strategy. And yeah, if you're doing something stupid like that when you want purchases that doesn't really make any sense, maybe you can see some major differences in your results by switching to a strategy where you go for purchases instead. You see what I'm saying? But if you are applying the fundamentals, right? No matter what creative testing strategy you use, whether you choose to use flexible ads, whether you choose to use whatever, just regular ads inside the ad account, whether you're doing something with a second campaign where you first test in the campaign. If you apply the fundamentals and you understand how to actually look at the data, then the creative testing strategy itself doesn't really matter all that much if it accomplishes the goal and you're looking at the right things. In other words, whether I use, for example, if I'm looking at ads and I know how to actually look at the numbers, I know how to actually tell what a winning ad looks like in the account and outside of the account, it doesn't matter really all that much if I'm using flexible ads or if I'm using a different type of ad. And you see these people online, some of them are very smart. Some of them have some really, really good information, but they get so fixed on their way of doing things. And they say, oh, well, you have to run flexible ads. You have to do flexible ads with this many creatives and this many headlines, and you can't test ads in any other way. It's just not true. You can test ads in other ways, and there's many brands out there who are, for example, spending millions of dollars in a month, and they're not running flexible ads. There's many brands out there that are, and they may be running flexible ads. It doesn't, it's these sort of like little tiny nuanced details are probably not going to be the thing that makes the biggest difference. Most likely. I don't know your specific situation, but I can tell you right now that your creative testing strategy, as long as you know how to read the data, and that is important, the strategy itself isn't going to be probably the thing that really gets you there. So the next thing is ROAS should be the number one metric you look at. You say, well, why would I not be focusing on ROAS? A few different reasons here. Number one, the ROAS inside your ad account doesn't tell you much. It doesn't tell you much because, one, the information is not going to tell you the effectiveness overall of your advertising efforts. It's going to tell you how many sales Facebook, or Meta as it's called now, attributes to, how much they think they can attribute to the ads that you're shown. Here's the problem with that. There's many cases out there where people will buy a product and it will take them more than 7 days from when they see their first ad for that brand to make a purchase. That doesn't mean that those ads didn't have an effect on that decision to purchase, right? The attribution window in and of itself is 7 days on the platform, right? So already just from that alone, you know that ROAS cannot tell you the full story. Now, what about, for example, have you ever seen an ad for something, screenshotted it, sent it to somebody, texted somebody about it and said, hey, this might be a good gift for somebody else? Do you think that every single one of those sales that they get when the person who saw the ad sent it to somebody else is going to be able to be tracked back to the ad platform itself? You see what I'm saying? And not to mention the fact of the platform itself uses this thing called statistical modeling to try to figure out where a purchase came from, right? And that may not be 100% accurate 100% of the time. So looking in the ad account platform and saying, well, the ROAS is the only thing that should matter, it doesn't tell you the full story. You may have an ad that has a bad ROAS. Oh my gosh, it's not profitable, right? But when that ad spends money, all these other people, it's great at getting people to talk about your brand and talk about your product, and they're sharing it with other people and telling other people about, whatever the case is. And it's great at filling the funnel as a top of funnel ad, has a bad ROAS, but when that ad spends money, all of a sudden the bank account starts looking better. All of a sudden your blended metrics, which matter a lot more than your ROAS, start to get better when that ad spends money. You don't think you should be focused on that maybe? But if you're looking at just the ROAS, you would turn that ad off. And then what happens a lot of times is you turn that ad off, and then what happens? You see what I'm saying? So ROAS in and of itself, it's not going to tell you the full story, because all that's telling you is, if you're talking about the ROAS inside the ad account, it's basically a guess at where purchases came from based on the data they have. It's not 100%. I mean, it might be close in terms of the attribution side, but you can't even see all the purchases that come from that, and you can't see concrete data. It's not concrete, right? If you look at blended metrics, that's a lot more concrete. So anyways, your ROAS should not be the number one only metric, the gold metric that you're looking at. Like, oh, this ad has to have this ROAS. Do you think that when somebody makes a purchase that it's one specific ad that is the only reason they purchase? Or do you think they may see 20 ads? They may see 10, 20, 30 ads before they purchase. They may wait a month or two. They may keep that in their mind, like, oh, I'm going to come back and buy this around this time. You see what I'm saying? So you can't just look at that as the golden metric. All right, the next one ties directly into that. Your ROAS tells you exactly how many sales come from your ads. So we already kind of debunked that one. You can't say this because it's never going to be able, it's not even possible really to be able to tell the exact effectiveness of how many sales come directly from those ads. You can look at some stuff to gauge the incrementality and try to figure out, exactly how incremental your sales are. You can do all kinds of stuff, but you can't really tell exactly how many sales come directly from your ads. What you can look at, though, is you can, for example, let's say you've got a brand and organically, they're not even running ads, right? And they're doing 30, 40, 50K a month. Let's just say 50K a month for the sake of math. Then you turn on your ads and you're spending $5,000 a month on ads, and now they're doing 60K a month. You can have a good idea about how effective your ads are just based on the historical data that you have. But it can be a very challenging thing to determine exactly how incremental the ads actually are. There's signs and stuff that you can look at, but it's not as simple as you might think of, oh, well, just look at the ROAS. Sometimes, for example, on Facebook, you may have a lower ROAS, but it may be filling your funnel. You may be bringing in a lot of net new people. I'll give you an example of this on why your ROAS can't really be the end-all be-all metric. We use an app here. We've been testing out an app that is a survey app where you can ask a few questions at the end after somebody makes a purchase. We'd cut one of our main Facebook campaigns off for a brand I run ads for. And long story short, even after cutting this campaign off, like 40% of their sales or something are still showing that they came from Facebook. And they don't do as much like organic promotion and stuff on Facebook for their products. We would think it would be, if it's organic sales coming in, that it'd be mainly coming from TikTok. And they had some sales coming from TikTok, which were also running TikTok ads, right? But the vast majority of their business, it was showing, was coming from Facebook, even with this main campaign turned off, right? Like 40%, and then all the others are like maybe 10%, right? Or whatever it is. And when you look at the attribution, the interesting thing is the vast majority of these sales did not happen within 7 days of them hearing about us. A lot of times it was weeks, sometimes a month, up to 3 months. Between that time period of like 1 week or more to up to 3 months is when a lot of these sales were happening. And so you think, oh, well, the ROAS is the only thing I should be looking at for the success of my ads. Well, your attribution window is up to 7 days. And in this case, this brand, most of their business was coming from the platform where we're spending the most money, right? Which makes sense. And now I think it's like close to 50%. We turned the main campaign back on at a little bit of a lower budget. So like a lot of their business is coming from this one platform, right? Which makes sense because we're spending the most money on ads there. But if you think about it, how are you going to gauge the success of your marketing when the actual attribution window of how long it takes somebody to make a sale may be longer than 1 week? Just from that alone, it's not accurate. You see what I'm saying? You can get a general idea by looking at the cost per result, but that can't tell you the full story, because it's not going to tell you which ads are actually fully responsible for driving those sales and pushing people over the edge. And so it's a limited way of looking at things when you're just focusing on just what's inside the ad account, because it doesn't tell the full story. Even with third-party attribution software, it's not going to tell the full story, because you're not accounting for the incremental lift in sales, right? So it may vary from platform to platform. For other platforms, you may have a quicker sales cycles where it does happen within a week, like on TikTok or whatever, so it may be different between the platforms. But my point is, ads by themselves do not really make sales in the way that you think they do. Yes, they do can help you to drive business. Yes, they can bring new people and new customers into the door. But it's not the only thing that affects that. And it doesn't just happen within that window, is what I'm trying to say. So next here. So the CPMs, or daily frequency on Meta, Facebook, whatever, don't matter. This is another thing you hear a lot where people say, oh, well, the CPMs don't matter. The frequency doesn't matter. It does matter with context, right? If I have an ad that is a top of funnel ad, so it's got a bad cost per purchase, but it also has a bad CPM, so bad cost per purchase, bad CPM, low AOV on the purchases that it thinks are coming from the ad. You may look at that and you may think, well, the CPMs don't matter. The CPMs matter because it tells you how many net new people. One, tells you how many people, basically, how efficient is this ad at reaching new people, is what it's essentially telling you with the CPMs. The frequency matters in context, again, because the frequency can help you to figure out where the ad is being used in the funnel. For example, let's say you got an ad, and every day, if you break the frequency down by day, it's coming in at a 1.3, 1.4. That may mean that is a ad that is lower in the funnel versus an ad that comes in at a 1.02 with higher spend and a lower CPM. So anyways, my point here is your CPMs do matter and your frequency does matter in context. This is the thing a lot of people leave out. They speak in these absolutes as if these things don't matter. They do matter with context, right? And the context is important to making some of these decisions. So the next thing is, you hear this all the time on titles, just people talking, saying stuff to get the clicks and get the views. They say, oh, if you just use this hack, you use this setting in your ad account. Oh, make sure you turn on your info label, whatever it is. They preach about all these hacks and all these new trending features and everything and tell you how it's going to double your ad account overnight. The vast majority of those things are completely useless, in my opinion, and it's just a waste of time. Even if, say, for example, you find something that works that gets you 0.01% better in performance, that's probably distracting you from the thing that could get you 100% better performance or 200% better performance if you just focused on the right things. But you're so obsessed with looking for these shiny objects or trying this new thing over here, and then, oh, we got to try this thing over here. Hey, let's test this with the call to action buttons, and then we're going to test these info labels, and then we're going to test these interest groups and these audiences and these lookalikes and blah, blah, blah. And you're testing all these things that are not the things that are largely responsible for getting the results, and you're wasting your time because you're focused on the wrong things. That's the point I'm trying to make. Sure, there might be some quick hacks out there where you can see a 0.01% better performance from your ads, but they are distracting you from the things where you could be seeing 30%, 40%, 50% better performance for your ads if you focused on the right things and stop chasing hacks. The real marketers know there are no hacks. There's very, very few hacks, I should say. Very, very few hacks that you can do to see instantly better performance. One example of a real case where you could do something to see better performance is if your ad account is just set up in a way that is not efficient. This is not something, though, where it's not like the other things. It's, say, for example, you're running ads for add to carts and you're using ABO, and somebody came in who knows what they're doing, who can look at that and say, this person probably doesn't know what they're doing based on how this is set up, right? Because you can usually tell by how an ad account is set up, whether it's the same testing method you use or whatever. You can usually look and see, like, hey, does this person at least have an idea of what they're doing here? It can be a little technical, but say, for example, somebody who knows what they're doing comes into that ad account. All they do, basically, they launch some just basic ads. They cut the stuff off and they set it up in a way that actually makes sense. So they're using CBO instead of ABO so that they can allow the machine to be more efficient. They cut any of the fluff campaigns that aren't really doing anything. In that case, yes, you could see a pretty dramatic improvement in efficiency, but it's not really a hack. It's allowing the machine to do the work and not trying to micromanage the machine, right? And outside of that, outside of just ad account issues with just missing the basics on how the account is set up, there's very, very few hacks out there with special buttons and special features that are really going to make the difference, right? So chasing hacks is just going to distract you from the things that work. Now, the next thing is, you hear this a lot too, where people like to make it sound like they're always seeing amazing results. Like everything is always just sunshine and rainbows with Facebook. And I'll tell you something right now. The people who will not ever talk about times things didn't go well, times things weren't working, the times they were struggling, a lot of times these people are lying to you. They're trying to deceive you, to sell you something, because anybody who's been in advertising knows it's not always sunshine and rainbows. No matter where you're at, whether you're spending $1,000 a month, $10,000 a month, 30, 100,000, whatever it is, no matter how much money you're spending on ads, you're going to run into bad weeks. You're going to have bad months. I mean, heck, Facebook at the time I'm making this right now has been having these past month or so, major delivery issues over like the past roughly 2 months. And, for us, for example, I run ads for business, and these past couple months especially have just been kind of rough. It's not been all sunshine and rainbows. Now, here recently things have started to get better, but my point is, it's not always going to be perfect. There's going to be issues that come up with Facebook's delivery issues due to these updates that they're making and everything or whatever. Or you may just have bad weeks just due to slow weeks. You may have times where you're having creative issues and your ads aren't working as well as they used to, and you're having a hard time finding new winning ads. There's going to be times when things are not sunshine and rainbows. But a lot of people love to talk about the wins, but they don't talk about the rough times because they want to deceive you. They want to make it sound like it's so easy because they want you to give them money. A lot of times is what it really is. They're trying to get you to give them money, so they want to sound like they are good at what they do rather than being honest. So next thing is, you hear this a lot too. Oh, cost caps are the key to success. Interest groups are the key to success. This hack over here is the key to success. This goes back to the same thing I was talking about the quick hacks. There are no quick hacks outside of some ad account consolidation stuff, where you have like an ad account that's just being improperly ran in an inefficient way. Outside of that, there are no quick hacks. Trust me. To my knowledge, at least, I've been doing this for about 4+ years, probably close to 5 years now. There are no quick hacks, and the more time that you spend chasing the hacks is time that you're not spending focusing on the proven, predictable stuff that works. How much time are you spending worrying about interest testing and cost caps and ABO and bid caps and the attribution window and exclusions and all this stuff? Imagine if you took all that time and you focused on, well, how do I improve the conversion rate of my website or my revenue per visitor? How do I improve my AOV? What offers do I test? How do I make better ads? Have you thought about that? Like, take all that time that you're spending looking for the hacks and just focus on the proven, predictable stuff. Okay, how can I get my AOV up by $3? You get your AOV up by $3, and your ads are probably going to get better if nothing else changes. Or you have a better converting website because you run tests with IntelliGems or whatever. You find a better converting version of your landing page, your ad performance is probably going to get better. You find new winning angles with your ads, new winning messaging. You test different formats of creatives and you find new winning ads. Your ad account is probably going to get better, but nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear about the hacks. They want to hear about the quick and easy fixes because everybody wants what's quick and easy. So, anyways, the next one is ads by themselves can fix a business. It does not matter. I'm going to say this for anybody who's watching. This is based on my opinion. This is all based on my opinion. I'm not making any earning claims, no financial claims. I don't know your specific business, but I can tell you from my experience, in my opinion, ads by themselves cannot fix a bad business. I'll say it again. Ads by themselves cannot fix a bad business. If you're selling a freaking magical genie lamp, right? And you rub the lamp 3 times and the genie comes out of the bottle and he grants your every 3 wishes, but your cost of goods is $20 and you're selling the lamp for $30, and none of your customers come back to buy again because they have no reason to buy again. I don't care how good your product is. You're not going to be able to see success, in my opinion, if it's unrealistic to see success at the current state of the business. Now, let's say, for example, you sell the lamp for $59.99 instead, right? And you get your cost of goods down because you find a better manufacturer for this hypothetical lamp, right? And obviously this is kind of a ridiculous example, but let's say you get your cost of goods down to where you're paying $5 a lamp and you're selling it for $60. And then now you're scheduling out new drops for different colors. And so now you have a reason for people to come back and buy again, right? There's a reason that people would come back and buy again now. So now you have returning customers. Now you have a margin that you can actually maybe run some ads to potentially make it realistic to see some success. And then now you're scheduling out drops, you're nurturing your email list, you're sending out emails on a weekly basis, you're working on your retention, you're testing your email flow pop-up or your email pop-up to get new subscribers in the door because that's going to be a large source of where you can get returning customers from these new drops and these new releases. And then you come out with different sizes and you're coming out with different products. Now you might be able to have a business. But the ads are not going to fix the problem. If the problem is that you're selling the lamp for $20 or that cost you $20 and you're selling it for $30 and you're like, well, why are my ads not working? I'm paying $30 for a customer. The problem isn't that you're paying $30 for a customer. The problem is that you have a bad business because you haven't been focused on the business. You're focusing on the wrong things. You're looking for the shortcuts, and that's why you're stuck. It's not your marketing's problem. It's not realistic to say, well, I want all these customers because I saw some videos online at a $5 cost per purchase at scale. That's not realistic. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not realistic to say that. I could say, well, I want to bench press 3,000 pounds. I can want to do that all day, but it's not realistic. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to understand how this stuff works, and you have to be focused on the right things if you want to succeed in your business. It's not just the ads that will make you successful. You have to have a good business. The ads are like pouring gasoline on a fire, right? It can speed up the process of, say, for example, you have a good business. Let's say you're selling a product and your LTV is like $300, right? On this specific product. It's really good margin. You have a solid business at least, right? Well, if you're paying $50 for a customer, even, it may not be the end of the world, right? If your customer spent 300 over their lifetime, but if they spend 30 and then over their lifetime they spend 40 and the product costs you 20 to make, you're not going to have any money because it's a math problem. It's just numbers. I mean, at the end of the day, it's people buying the product, but you have to think about the numbers. If you don't focus on the numbers, how can you be successful in business when it all comes back to the numbers? So that is one of the big things you hear a lot. You know, people think they have a problem with their cost per result. And a lot of times they just have a business problem because they don't understand business. The next thing is Facebook ads just don't work for me. If that were the case, do you think that there would be companies spending millions of dollars on Facebook ads if they just didn't work? They're one of the most powerful tools. They're also a very expensive way to get customers, but they are one of the most powerful tools that you could possibly use to get customers in the door because of how advanced the technology is that they have. Saying Facebook ads just don't work. Now, sure, there may be some products where you have a harder time getting them to work, depending on the product, right? It may depend on what you're selling, but generally speaking, your customers are probably on Facebook, most likely with most businesses. Saying that they don't work when there's companies spending millions and millions of dollars on Facebook, it's a limiting belief that'll keep you stuck where you're at, right? I mean, pretty much everybody's on Facebook. You can get the ads to work. It just depends how well, right? Is it going to be the most efficient channel? Is it going to be the place where you should spend most of your focus? For a lot of businesses, it's their top of funnel channel where they're investing most of their money because it works so well at getting people in the door. But how's the rest of your business? You may think you have a Facebook ad problem because you're paying $30 to get a new customer in the door. When in reality, the problem is that they only spend $10 after that initial order. If you would fix that, you fix your business, but you don't understand how to spot that and what to look for. And that's the problem because you don't know your numbers. Not knowing your numbers will keep you stuck where you're at and make you go out of business if you don't make decisions based on the numbers. The next thing is, now this is one a little bit controversial, maybe you could say. There's some people out there who are really smart, and they'll say things like, oh, well, Facebook ads never fatigue if you use broad targeting because of this and this and this, and they only get better. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of these people, they've got some great advice. They're very smart, and they've done these great things when it comes to advertising and everything. But the problem is sometimes when you're dealing with people who are very smart or very intelligent, they say things in a way where they're basically we're like mincing words almost. What they're really saying is, oh, well, we know your ads, for example, can get less effective over time. But because the frequency doesn't go up and because the CPMs don't just skyrocket all of a sudden, like if you're running just a very, very small audience, it might happen, or whatever the case is, that means the ads don't fatigue. So we know that the ads will stop working after a while and being as effective and as efficient as they reach broader and broader audiences, because it's kind of like a line graph. It's like, it starts off at the most probable to convert and then goes to less probable and less probable. And in theory, the ads should get better also at showing to the right people, but eventually they will become less efficient, right? And so that's why you have to also be testing new ads and finding new winning angles. But they'll say things like these ads never fatigue. And while if they would explain the context of that, it would make more sense. When you hear that, if you don't understand what they're saying, it can mislead you into thinking you should never have to test new ads. Or if you hear, oh, well, every time you test new ads, the machine becomes less effective. Does it really? I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? It's like, it sounds great to hear that, and it sounds like it may be helpful information if you would fully explain what you're saying, but because you're not giving the context of that, people hear that and they think that they don't have to test new ads, and then they'll be in the ad account, and all the ads that they've got running have been running for like a year and a half, and they don't understand that, like, why are my ad account, or why are my results getting worse and worse? Well, it's because you're not testing new ads. You know, at some point those ads will get worse at doing the job, right? You can't just leave the ads running, just be done with it, right? And so saying that Facebook ads never fatigue, I mean, I get what you're saying there, but you're saying it in a way that can confuse people and mislead people into doing things that can cost them a lot of money. Like if you think you should just leave your ads running forever and ever and ever and never test new ads to try to beat those out, like it's not a very responsible thing to say without giving the context. So anyways, if you guys found this helpful, feel free to drop a comment below. Let me know what you want to see next. And let me know if you are with a brand and you're seeing this and you want me to check out your brand, give you a review. Drop your brand name below in the comments, and I will send you a review if it looks like a good fit. So anyways, with that being said, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe for more. And that is about all for this video.